Hey folks, in this episode, it's all about The Loop. This is TWIP. Hey, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, I'm talking with my friend, Keren Sachs. We're going to be talking about her new, actually, it's not even that new, but it's a service that you may not have heard about. I don't even know if service is a good name for it. Keren can explain what The Loop is all about, but it's something, I'll tease it like this. Keren, you can tell me if I'm wrong. It is something that is serving a niche that is severely underserved right now, and she's at the right place at the right time with the right product. Keren Sachs, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me, and great description of what we're building at The Loop.
Was that amorphous enough?
It was. Why don't I go a little bit deeper and talk. What we like to say is that we're building a platform that is connecting the world's best diverse photographers, commercial, professional photographers with brands around the world to make great work. We want to help brands get content simply. We want to simplify that process, and we want to help photographers, especially underrepresented, diverse photographers, get work. So we're bringing those two together on our platform, The Loop.
Wonderful. See, that sounds like you practiced that in front of the mirror, didn't you? See?
Maybe once or twice. I've been saying it a lot lately.
Yeah, that's you're trapped in an elevator with
Right.
Elon Musk and you're pitching,
Right, exactly. That's my elevator pitch.
That's cool. I love it. That's a perfect elevator pitch. Okay, so let's rewind. I want to dive into The Loop and kind of understand, at a DNA level what it is you've built and are building. Right. But let's understand who Keren Sachs is first. What's your pedigree that brought you from A to B?
Sure, no problem. So I have been in the photo industry for close to 20 years. It sounds a little crazy to say that, 20 years. But that's how long it's been. I started my career at National Geographic. I actually, backing up a little bit, started taking photography classes in high school like many photographers. They always put in their About Me section on their website that somebody gave them a camera when they're 15 or 16 years old. Similar for me. I started taking classes in photography classes in high school, fell in love with it, decided I wanted to major in photography. I went to the University of Michigan, where I studied photography. I have a BFA in photography. I also have a degree in American culture. So I did a BA in American culture. I felt like I needed both of those to take me where I wanted to go in my career. Yet I didn't know where I wanted to go in my career. I had this idea that I wanted to be at National Geographic. Like many photographers, many young aspiring photographers who wanted to go to National Geographic, I had my heart set on it. I didn't know what that would look like for me. I didn't know how I would get there. I didn't know what I would do there, but I knew I needed a career in photography and I wanted to start it there. And that's what I did. When I graduated from the University of Michigan, in August, that following summer, the end of the summer, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I started a job at National Geographic Kids magazine as a photo assistant and worked my way up to photo editor. I was there for 4 years. It was an unbelievable experience. I would ride in the elevators. Speaking of elevators, I would ride in elevators with photographers whose work I had been studying in school, and I would be so nervous. I often wouldn't know what to say to them, but they were my heroes, my superstars. They were who I wanted to be around and to study their work and to know their images. And I loved taking my film to get dropped off at the film lab at National Geographic. How cool that there was a film lab there. And yes, we were still shooting film in those days. And I would be, right next to Steve McCurry or Jody Cobb. And that to me was the coolest thing. So I was there for 4 years. And over that time, I realized that my place was not behind the camera. It was not being a photographer. It was working with photographers. So I started to get a glimpse of really what I wanted to be doing. And with each move I made along my career, I got closer and closer to what it is that I wanted to be doing. So after I left Geographic, I moved up to New York and I started freelancing for the Wall Street Journal. Started meeting a lot of photographers, being in studios with them, kind of understanding how they operated, how they worked, how they got jobs. And from there, where did I go? Martha Stewart. I was at Martha Stewart Living. I was a director of photographer on the merchandise side at Martha. unbelievable experience. I felt like I was working with the best of the best. It's actually where I met my husband. And I worked on all of her different product lines, overseeing the photography for the product lines, working with Martha on a couple shoots, which was an incredible experience. And I also, after I left there, I went to a place called Trunk Archive. I skipped one. I was at Corbis for a little bit. Corbis, which is now part of Getty Images in the stock photography world. So I was getting glimpses of different aspects of the photo industry, starting with editorial, moving into commercial with Martha's products, moving into stock photography. At Trunk Archive, I worked with high-end photographers, a boutique photo agency. So I kept kind of building. I think these were all building blocks. And then more recently, I was at Shutterstock for 5 years. So that's when I really understood what it meant to build products and to work for a tech company in the photo space. Yeah. And then that has led me to The Loop.
And now you're an entrepreneur. All right, I want to dig a little bit deeper on a couple of things. I was making notes. First of all, what a storied lineage. That's awesome. That is like, that's the dream sort of ascension that photographers want to make. Like you said, I was given this little ratty camera when I was a kid and I got bitten by the bug, and now, and one thing led to another. And like you said, Nat Geo is or I don't know if it is still, but it's still a storied brand. And when I was coming up in photography, it was the Holy Grail. It's like, if you think you're a Nat Geo photographer, it was
right, exactly.
It was that level. It was something to ascend to. So when you say high-end photographer, what like from someone with that pedigree, what does high-end photographer mean to Keren? What is a high-end photographer?
Sure. So at Trunk Archive, and then just how I've thought about it after, everybody today is a photographer, right? Everyone has a camera in their pocket. Everyone's phone has a camera on it. We are all photographers. But how do you start to differentiate between the types of photographers, between my mom taking photos or my brother taking photos versus somebody who's getting paid for those photos? And then there's within that the various tiers. So when I say high end, which was the terminology that we used at that company, it was in reference to photographers who were shooting for major brands, for luxury goods, for Louis Vuitton, for Chanel. The photographers who were shooting those campaigns were represented by that agency. So they were making, significant, serious money to shoot, to get behind the camera and to create content. So when you think about Annie Leibovitz, when you think about the photographers whose names people would know, everyday people would know who are not in the photo industry, those are the photographers that you start to think about or connect with at that high-end level.
Yeah. So hello, testing. Okay. Yeah. So when you're speaking to, and this is the sort of the segue into Loop, but when you're speaking to photographers that want to ascend to that place, right? They want to be the high-end photographer, but they're like, for example, you look at some of the photographers that are on 500px.com or other sites, and the work up there is just intimidatingly good, right? But they may not be making any money with it. So does high-end photographer, is there a definition of a high-end photographer that is skill set based or quality of work based or brand based, and is there a separate high-end, quote, high-end photographer that is monetary and salary? And, when you can command $50K for a shoot, then you're a high-end photographer. Like, what do you think? For the people that want to get to that level, how do you define it?
That is a great question. And yes, it's not all about the money. I think that's a nice aspect of it, but it is about the skill set. And I think that's really what differentiates an everyday, iPhone user versus somebody who has studied the craft, who has really taken the time to learn, to observe. So a lot of the pictures that you might be referring to on some of the community sites that you see are outstanding. The photography is incredible. But I would say that a lot of that photography is nature and outdoor photography, animal photography, not necessarily situational photography in a studio, right? So when I'm looking at a photographer's portfolio, I'm looking to see, do they understand composition? Do they understand lighting? It is very different to take a picture outside in natural light and understand where the light is coming from than to be able to recreate that natural light in a studio. That is a skill. That is something that you learn and that you practice. And so, yes, a lot of people can go outside and take a picture of a sunset. And I am not knocking pictures of sunsets. We need them.
Yeah.
But can you translate that in another situation? Can you bring that light somewhere else? Can you make that light on someone's body so it reflects them in a certain way? It tells a certain story. Can you create an image that's unique that no one else can create? That's what I look at when I look at portfolios. That, for me, is what sets the high end or the distinguished or the more established photographers apart from the everyday person taking pictures.
Absolutely. That's well said. And it's, when we talk about professional versus amateur, like, for example, when I was at Adobe, the distinction between the advanced amateur photographer and the professional photographer, like you said, wasn't necessarily monetary. It was the purest definition of amateur, right? So the definition of amateur is someone who does something for the love of doing it, not for monetary gain behind it. Their work could be every bit as good or even better in some cases than the pro, who is restricted by clients and time constraints and all those sorts of things. So it's interesting that, what that path is, to sort of think about from someone who wants to get from A to B, how to get there, and how do you put, like you said, you got to put the skill behind it in order to charge the money. And tell me if you agree with this, one of the definitions of being a professional is someone, or to phrase it differently, an amateur can rely on serendipity, right? You can go out and say, hey, look at that sunset. I'm going to use my skills to capture that sunset. Or, hey, look at that interesting scene in Paris on the street. I'm going to capture that and process it. I'm going to use my skills to process that. The professional can't rely on serendipity. The professional has to rely on repeatability. And when a client says, I want this, just like you did last month, you have to be able to execute that exactly and match those colors and all that detail. So yeah, it is interesting. I love the talk about photography and getting into those nuances. Right. Keren, shifting gears into the Loop. This is where you are now. So you took that lineage and everything that a lot of the things that you've learned over the years and focused them and put on your entrepreneur hat and built something for photographers. Can you talk about that and what the sort of inception of the Loop is? Sure,
absolutely. Hearing you say that, it makes me kind of think that I went through a boot camp. I gained as much knowledge as I could at each one of these places in the commercial and the editorial industry. I wanted to learn as much as I could and make connections and network. So just going back to the previous conversation, I think that making those connections, networking, studying photography, all helps you become a better photographer, assisting the great photographers, finding people whose work you love and assisting them. That makes a huge difference. You want to learn as much as you can. You want to practice, but you want to learn about lighting, about composition, about the control of the situation and controlling that lighting. So for me, with the Loop, I had these experiences working with incredible women photographers at many of the places where I worked. And I became good friends with them. And they stayed in my network. And at different places where I worked, I would hire them or stay in touch with them. They became my girlfriends. And when I left Shutterstock, it was right after the most recent election, or right before the most recent election. I guess, what are we coming up on 4 years now? And I wanted to build something good. I wanted to build something new and fresh. And the first thing I did was turn to the women in my network who had always been there for me, or I had hopefully been there for them. And I wanted to build a community for them because I realized that community that I was envisioning did not exist for women of all walks of life who had a great love of photography, who were experienced, who were skilled, who were people who should be getting jobs right and left and maybe weren't. I wanted to build community for them. I wanted a place where I could talk to all of them at once. And the more I thought about that idea, I got to the concept of, okay, it's great to build community. Community is fantastic. Let's build community. But helping people generate income, that's where things start to change. That's where things get interesting. It's not just about connecting and making friendships. It's about helping people make a living. And that's where the notion, the idea of the loop started. It really began from that concept.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, when you're talking about sort of the post-election epiphany of, okay, I need to sort of do something, and do something different to sort of counteract the negativity that's going on. I think that's fantastic. Have you seen, like, you're based on the East Coast, right? So have you seen, like, what's the lay of the land out there in terms of companies being inclusionary when they're hiring either, minorities or people with different sexual orientations? Is it a straight white man's market out there, or are they more liberal out there when it comes to hiring practices?
I think it depends from magazine to magazine, from brand to brand, what the brand is about, how much they want to kind of put their money where their mouth is. How much they care about that and believe in it and then go out and look for it. So we know, you and I have talked about this before, that photography has been a wealthy white industry for years and years for men. And there's no denying that. Just before this call, I Googled great men photographers and great women photographers, and every single picture that came up was of a white person. There was no diversity at all. And even just typing in great photographer, you typically just see men looking back at you. So that's who we're learning from. We're learning from their perspective. And the reason this is such an important conversation is if the perspective we're seeing is of just one person, one type of person, then how are we seeing this world? If the images you see walking down the street are always shot by the same type of person, then they're never going to reflect you as a Black man, or they're not going to reflect me as a white woman. So that's why we need diversity behind the lens. We also need diversity in front of the lens. It can't be just white people who are taking pictures off. Right. It's so important that we have this conversation. It's so important that brands look deep and think about who it is that they hire and of their hiring practices. And I think we can all do better. I have heard stories before I came here to talk to you. I kind of went out to all of our photographers on our Slack channel and said, tell me your stories. What's your experience been like as a woman photographer, or as a queer photographer, or as a Black photographer? I want to know what you are experiencing so that I can share those stories. And so many of the women said that when they are on set, they're often thought of as the assistant. Nobody believes that they are the photographer because you immediately think of the photographer as being the man. So how do we change that perspective that we are also thinking of women as being the photographer, of calling the shots, of actually creating the shots, right? How do you change that conversation? And another photographer sent me a private message and said, just last year I was on a shoot, and when the subject realized that I was a photographer, they insisted on a male photographer. And nobody stood up for me. Nobody talked about my work. I had to leave, and they brought on a male photographer. The year was 2019. That is happening. That is still happening. So all of these stories are why we need to create the loop, why we need to build a community for underrepresented photographers, for women photographers, to support them and help them find jobs, and most importantly, amplify their voices. So that's the goal. That's what we're doing.
I love that. I love that. And you and I have talked about this before, so I'm glad we're recording that. And it's interesting what you say about sort of someone demanding a male photographer. It's that perception, I think, is, and you're in a better position to comment on this than I am, but that perception looks like it's changing, or the change will be gradual, kind of like turning a giant cruise ship. You can't turn on a dime. You turn, gradually with initiatives like the Loop, et cetera, and other things that are happening. And it reminds me of kind of like and I've seen this happen, you go out to dinner, and tell me if this has happened to you, right? You go out to dinner, you're in charge, right? You're the CEO or whatever. The bill comes and they give it to the person that looks like that should be the person that's paying the check.
Right.
When it's not you. I mean, right? The same thing with job bidding, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a perception, and there's a perception of pay, of equalizing pay in the photo industry, of how much you should pay a guy and how much you should pay a woman. And we want to build this to amplify these voices, as I said, so that women feel stronger, feel that their voices are heard, feel like they can stand up for themselves. We want to kind of be that support in their lives so that they can get jobs. The more photographers who are working who are women, the more diverse perspectives we have out there in the world looking back at us. Yeah. And that's the important piece. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit all the notes, because it's if history is written by the perspective of history is written by the people that are writing it, right? So if it's all one kind of person, you get a very bland, myopic view of history. And in order to have a colorful history, you got to have a bunch of different perspectives,
right?
So. Yeah, and you guys are helping with that. So let's dive deeper into the loop. Let's move the loop closer.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So what's the lay of the land, the demographic of the loop? Like, who's in there? Who's interacting? Who's chatting back and forth? And who's getting jobs? What does that look like?
Sure, absolutely. So we are close to 200 photographers from around the world. Last time I checked, we had 16 countries represented. We are working to expand that. We want photographers in every country around the world. I think there's this perception that you need to be in LA or New York or London to become a professional photographer. What we want to do is bring the jobs to you wherever you are. So we just got some work in this morning, actually, from a photographer who just joined the Loop in Kenya. That's an important perspective that we need to have. We need to tell her stories. We need to bring jobs to her that she otherwise would not get. A photographer in Kenya would not be working with some of the brands that we are working with. How would they find her, right? So we want to find more photographers, the best of, the strongest ones that we can find around the world. Over time, we will be working with more amateur photographers and helping them up their game and learning from the more professional photographers in the Loop. So we definitely see that in our future. But right now, we are concentrated on working professional photographers in every state in the country, in the U.S. and then around the world. We have a Slack channel currently where all of these women are talking to one another, sharing kind of where they're from, what they're shooting, what they're working on, asking questions, coaching each other about pay and what they're asking for when they're working on jobs. And we will often list different things that are coming our way so that they're kind of in the loop, so to speak, on what we're working on. But our platform and what we're building out, we started building our platform in January of this year. Last year was really our foundational year. It was, this is an idea. Let's see if there's a product market fit. Let's see if people are interested in this. Let's see if people want to work with us and this vision that we have of what we're building. And when I say us, I have a team of a number of people who actually I worked with at Shutterstock, somebody I worked with at Martha Stewart, and other people have joined us along the way. We even have people who believe in this mission, believe in what we're doing, and are just lending their time, volunteering their time to help us create this business. So it's been really cool, really supportive, kind of my favorite working experience that I've had to date, even through COVID, even working from home with my two kids. It's been an experience, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I am learning so much as we build this platform. And we're really doing a lot of user testing with both our photographer community and the brands. We're understanding their needs, understanding what they want. And we're building out this platform. So if you are a photographer today, you can come, you can sign up and apply to the Loop. You can show us your work, we'll review it, and we'll accept you, or possibly we'll waitlist you if you're not quite right for what we're looking for now. If you are a brand, you can come to the Loop, you can sign up, tell us a little bit about your company and what it is that you're looking for, and then you can fill out a creative brief. And we go step by step asking questions to understand the needs that you have for a project, and then we match the brand with photographers. It could be one-to-one, one photographer to one brand, or with some of our larger clients or larger customers, they are tapping into our network and they need work from multiple photographers. We're working on a big job now with a big brand, and I think we have 12 photographers who are working on that project around the world. So diverse perspectives across multiple categories under one project. So that's the Loop today. We have many developments, many releases planned over the course of the year to this product to build out more features for both the brand and the creator or the photographer side.
I love it. I love it. Okay, to wrap it up, I'm interested in compensation and how that works.
Sure.
So, you answered the question before I even asked it, which is perfect. I was going to ask you, my next question on my list was going to be, okay, I'm a gay woman living in Nigeria, and I hear about The Loop on Frederick's podcast. What's a day in the life? So you kind of outline that, but then
Right.
what does comp look like? Right. So
Right.
does the Loop stay in business by taking a percentage? Do you get paid by the brands? How does
Right.
that
Exactly.
machine work?
Sure. So we're trying to simplify the traditional assignment photographer representative experience, which can be a very convoluted experience. You've seen other companies kind of pop up over time that are creating custom content for brands. And often it's at the very lower end of the spectrum when it comes to payment and fees.
Mm-hmm.
Part of amplifying voices is also making sure the photographers are getting paid what they should. The question is, what is that? What is that amount? So when we work with a brand, we talk to them about what their budget is. They fill that out in the creative brief. And right now, we will get on a phone with them and we will talk to them. We'll get on a call and we'll talk to them to make sure that we understand their total budget, what they can actually spend, and how that relates back to their needs, to the licenses that they need, so that we make sure that we are standing up for our photographers wherever they are, whatever country they're in, whatever state they're in. Just because you're a photographer in Ohio doesn't mean that you shouldn't make as much as a photographer in New York. The question of experience, of course, comes up. The question of skills, of course, comes up. But when we're looking at jobs, what we do is present a number to our photographers, what we believe is the best number that we can get, either as a day rate or more than likely on a per image basis. We present that to them and they can accept it or reject it. But we are working behind the scenes to get that number that we present to them as high as possible. We also are doing some image licensing. It's funny, after being in the image licensing space for so long, I thought there's no way I'm going to continue in image licensing. I had my 5 years at Shutterstock. I was at Corbis. I was at Trunk Archive, which is now Great Bowery. I'd been in that space. But what we're realizing is a number of our customers are coming to us and saying, we need new, fresh content for our brand, but we also want to license some pre-existing content. And because we have 200 photographers on our network and they all have large archives, we're able to dig through their archives and surface some images that we believe those brands will want. So with that, we do a 50-50 split, kind of a little bit higher than standard for licensing. We split that evenly with our photographers. So there's a few different touch points a photographer can have with us: joining the community, creating new custom content, and licensing their images, licensing their archive.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with a photographer, Dixie Dixon. She's a fashion photographer out of Texas, and just earlier this week, and the conversation went towards bidding or bidding jobs and the horror that is. Am I bidding, overbidding, and losing the job, or am I underbidding and shortchanging myself? And are they asking for multiple bids? So all that stuff, and it sounds like you're abstracting a lot of that away from the shoulders of the photographer, which I think is brilliant. And then on the other side of it, I was just thinking, when you talk about the budgets and how much a photographer can make, it's not geographically bound. So it's, if you are that Nigerian photographer, which has a very different economy and cost of living than New York City, for example, and you're making New York City level wages living in Nigeria, that's life-changing and generational life-changing income that you can change, that you can make, right? Right.
And why not? I mean, if you have the skills, if I'm coming to you because you are experienced, or you have maybe you haven't had the same opportunities because of where you live, but that you have studied, you've researched, you know how to compose, you understand lighting, and you can create a beautiful image that a brand wants, you should get payment for that. It shouldn't be less because of where you live, right? Let's equalize how we're paying and supporting photographers. And I think what you just touched on was there's this notion of treatments that photographers and often their agents will spend hours, if not days, putting together a treatment to bid on a job, saying, okay, this is the project that a brand has. This is how I will shoot it. This is who I will bring along. This is, the direction that I would go. And they put together these multi-page treatments. Then a brand, you don't know, or an ad agency, you don't know how many of these treatments they're getting from other photographers. And at the bottom of it, you put what your budget is, what you want to get paid. You don't know what you're up against. You don't know that range. You don't know how many other treatments are out there being sent in. And you put hours, if not days of time into that. Yeah. To me, that's crazy. I understand the art of the pitch. And I do believe that there's something special about pitching. But putting so much time and so much effort into something that has nothing to do with what you're actually creating, how can we simplify that process? There may always be a need for treatments to a certain extent. I mean, even as The Loop, we're a new brand. We are going to companies and we're selling ourselves to them. We are pitching them. We are telling them why they should work with us. We have put together pitch decks. We have put together PDFs. We want them to understand why they should want to hire Loop photographers. But I want to take that burden off of the shoulders of the photographer so that they can spend more time shooting, so they can spend more time creating, so they can spend more time learning and researching and studying. Let them concentrate on that and their craft and their artistry, and we'll handle the business side of things for them.
I love that. Yeah, because it's such a burden, right? Like when you're, like we said, you don't want to underbid, you don't want to overbid. And it's almost like and you've seen this, like salary negotiation when you're going to take a gig with a corporate, a different company, and they're like, okay, right, what salary do you want, right? If you're at that level and you're like, well, I don't want to lose this job, because I got to feed my family and pay my mortgage and my car payment. Exactly. So then it becomes an exercise in what's everybody else getting, and I'll just make mine comparable with no information. Wouldn't it be great if there was an intermediary there that has knowledge of that market that can help you and shepherd you through making the best pitch possible so that you feel good? Because at the end of the day, if you're a creative and you feel like you're not being compensated fairly for your work, it's going to impact the underlying work. Right. You may absolutely. You may not do as good a job, even subconsciously. But if you feel like I'm getting paid well for this, you're going to lean into it a little more. Right. You feel that?
Right. I mean, we could talk about the pay gap for days. I mean, and we know there's a discrepancy in what men are paid and what women are paid. So then you bring that to photography. And if you're a woman, if you're a young woman and you've got the skills and you're up for a job, you have no idea what the budget is. You have no idea what the range is. You don't know what they might have paid somebody last week. And that somebody could have been a man. And here you are as a woman, and they think they could get you for a lot less. So how do we help them not only educate the brands, educate the companies that are hiring the photographers, but educate the photographers? And we're learning from our photographers too. We're talking to them about what their ranges are. What do they typically get? What are they looking for? And how can we help them increase that? So we want to be more than simply a site that creates custom content. We also want to be that community, that supportive community for our photographers, where we can help them grow and learn and teach others. So that it's twofold when you think about it, what we're building.
Keren, in an ideal world, the bids for these jobs would be binary, right? It's like, okay, this is how much the job is, this is how much it takes to do it. It wouldn't be, well, from a brand perspective, how low can I get this work done for, and my question would be, how much, in your experience, I know this may be an unanswerable question, but the salary discrepancies between when people are getting paid, how much does race, geography, sexual orientation, gender, those variables, how much do those impact what a potential bid might be for a job, or do they at all? Like, I know you're working so that you can abstract that stuff out of it, but today, a snapshot of today, those four criterion: race, geography, sexual orientation, gender, right? Those things, are those things weighing, if for example, a brand knows that the photographer they have the data on one or more of those data points on a photographer, does that weigh on how much they're willing to pay that particular photographer, or is it not even part of the discussion?
I think we would be naive and foolish to say it's not part of the discussion. We know from everything that's been happening these last few months in the U.S. and what's been happening for years, we know there's a discrepancy. We know that it's not equal. We know that all of those things can count against you or for you, depending on where you're standing. So while I don't have the data and could not speak to the data on that, I think it would be interesting to pull our photographers, interesting to ask them, interesting to pull the photographers in your community and ask them, and find out what types of jobs these are and what kinds of usage and licenses and fees go along with that. I don't want to make assumptions, but I also don't want to be naive and to say that it's not a concern. It's not an issue. Right. I've heard stories of photographers who are queer not getting the jobs that they thought they were up for. I've heard stories of women not getting the jobs that they thought were up for. I had a photographer in our community who has a name that could be male or female. She's confused often as a male photographer. It would be interesting to see how that has worked in her favor and when that doesn't. So every photographer, not every, but I would say the majority of professional photographers have an About Me section on their website. And usually in that About Me section, they have their name and they have a photo of themselves. So that's very telling of who they are, right? And in the Loop, as we're building the Loop, we're very consciously building it so that you know who the photographers are. I believe in putting a face with the name and a face with the work. We have a portfolio representing each one of the photographers. They upload their images, and we have a little bit of a bio about them and their photo. We want you to know who they are. You're not just hiring somebody to click a shutter. You're hiring somebody to help you create something. So who that person is matters. Who you're bringing to the table matters. They have a voice. Let's amplify that voice. Let's bring it to the center of what you're building and create with them. So I'm not answering your question exactly as you posed it because I don't know the answer, but I think we know the answer.
Yeah. And in the end, it's like I said, it's an unanswerable question because who knows and some of these things won't play out for decades, right? We 2040, we may look back and say, hey, we've run the numbers and it looks like people that identify as this, and this were paid this percentage less than people that identify as this, and this, right? We won't know that because we're in the middle of the storm right now. And all we can do is try to keep the ship pointed in the right direction and do the right thing through companies like The Loop, right?
But here's what I'll say. Mm-hmm. It is so important now that we bring those voices up, that we raise those voices. It is important that the world of photography and the photographers who are getting the jobs look like the world around us, that they don't all look the same, because then we're going to have all the same voices and all the same stories. It is so important that we make sure that we bring other voices to the front of the table, bring other sets of eyes to the table, to have a seat at the table, to tell those pictures, tell those stories through their pictures. Yeah. That's what's important. That's how you change the game, is by hiring diverse photographers. So let's do that.
Love it. All right, let's wrap up with what's next. What's next for The Loop? What are you building? I know or are you done? Is your to-do list completely checked off and you're going to, relax and take a vacation?
I don't think it will ever be checked off. I think there is so much that we aspire to be and to build. Our team is heads down building right now, reaching out to new brands, working on jobs. We have photographers every day coming to the site and applying. I love kind of like seeing the notifications pop up. We have brands coming to the site. We want to build more features. We want to bring more people together. We want to pay out these photographers. We want to get them more jobs. We want to build this community to help support and establish photographers' presence. So I don't think my job will ever be complete. I don't think our team's job will ever be complete. We'll just keep building out features to make this community, make this platform stronger. So that's what's in store for me. Much more will be coming from The Loop. So I hope to come back and share more with you in the future.
I love it. Well, give us the location of The Loop and the spelling and all that, so people can go check it out during this interview or after, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Our site is The Loop, L-U-U-P-E, theloop.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at The Loop.
Love it. Keren Sachs, thank you so much for coming on. This interview has been a long time coming. I'm glad we recorded it. And I think this is an important interview. By any means, I don't think that we covered all the topics that we need to cover. So you'll have to come on again and we'll have to dive down. We got to dive deeper on some of these topics.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Keren Sachs, you have a good weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
This is TWIP.